Hey there, Brianne here, also known as the People Engineer, and welcome to another episode of the People Engineer podcast. I am beyond elated, and I know I get super excited anytime I have a guest, but Miss Diana Martinez is my guest today, and she's been a good friend of mine for several years now. Funny enough, before I even had this idea for a podcast, anytime Diana and I would meet up at an event or, just have a friend catch up, we would get in the deepest, most meaningful conversations, usually around nonprofits, our involvement in the community, being community leaders, particularly trying to represent and make proud our Hispanic community here in the DFW Metroplex. And it was like, man, like more people need to hear this conversation, more people need to be involved. So with that, I guess, Diana, do you remember the first time we met, or how even that introduction happened?
Yeah, so I remember I was working for Latina Style at the time, and we were looking for entrepreneurs for our panel. So I can't even remember. I think it was Ship who recommended you to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you were actively, and of course you still are active with Ship, but they're like, oh, definitely Brianne. So they like send you our way, and right away we had you on that panel, which of course, youngest person on the panel talking about entrepreneurship, and you kicked butt. So, and that's kind of really how our like relationship started. But even within being in Dallas Fort Worth, we just constantly kind of bumped into each other. And like you mentioned, it's like always just motivating each other. I think that's what I've really enjoyed about our relationship is anytime, we see each other, it's like, hey, how are you doing? What can I help you with?
Yep.
Like, how can we support each other was ultimately the thing that has like kept us, in contact with each other, like in your network. And you want people like that. So definitely would not trade you out at all.
Oh, thank you.
And so
Yeah.
excited to see just, how much we've both grown and how much we've done within like this short time frame. And of course we don't talk every day, but either way, like if I know that, hey, Brian, I have a question about this, or I need help with this, like I know I can go to you, and I hope like vice versa, you can do the same. So I think that's been a great part of our relationship, and knowing you, and seeing where you're going as far as the bright future I know you have.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. And it's funny because you say that, and I thought, oh, yeah, that was like I had literally gotten laid off earlier that year. The Latina style business, again, kind of like women in business panel came up. And I was like, look,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just starting out, but like I'm having a blast. And the fact that I believed in myself, I can do this. And these are the questions I'm asking my customers. Um, Again, I felt like that was the first time, especially again, you and your team was like, no, like again, share like you just getting started. Like there are people that have an idea and are too afraid to go out there. So again, like you said, that relationship of us just cheering each other on and like, girl, like it's good for you, turning, I want to say what a lemon situation into lemonade.
Yeah.
Really gave me my first like, okay, I can do this, like it's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to not know what I'm doing, but yet share, the progress I'm making or the questions I'm asking. It's funny because you were saying all of this and I'm like, yeah, actually I remember that now because it was 3 years ago and I've had my business for 3 years now. And it's
That's
amazing.
crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So likewise, thank you so much for always being that friend. Okay, so without further ado, I'll kind of just jump in and start asking, when it becomes to you and your work, and I know you started with Latina Style, I guess, can you give us a little bit about your career or how being a Latina has played into that?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. My career has been a little bit hectic as far as just being a passionate person, and I always follow my passion and follow kind of my gut feeling as to what I need to do next. With the overall goal that whatever I do next, it's going to be a bigger impact or bigger help to people. So I think that's what I'm also always constantly like gauging within myself, like where can I make the most impact.
Mhm.
So worked at Latina Style, and that was a great opportunity because we were working in a very niche initiative, and it was like, how do we continue to like provide more opportunities for Latinas in corporate America, in the military, highlighting Latinas in the military and things like that. So that was kind of where I started my journey in diversity and inclusion, on the side of the nonprofit, right? So being always with partner organizations that are working with diversity and inclusion within corporate America. And then I got the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. So I just moved back from there. I was there last year working for SID, the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility. And like I mentioned, it's just been, those doors open, and I'm very fortunate to get the opportunity to go and learn. And that's definitely what I'm doing. I'm soaking everything in from the national to the local level and seeing how can we help our communities, how can we connect to tools and resources and all that good stuff. So I'm just been a sponge in this world. So I've been now in, I guess, nonprofit fundraising for about 5 years. I think it's like 5 years, going on 5 years. And now with Prospanica, so the National or Association of Hispanic MBAs and Business Professionals. So again, been on this side, but I'm very active in listening to what Corporate America is doing, to what opportunities they're offering, and just what's the latest news and trends. So it's kind of a little bit, it can get a little too much into the detail, but it's fun. It's really fun for me. I actually began learning about diversity and inclusion at the university level
Mm-hmm.
as a graduate student. And I was like, wait, people do this for a living? Like your job is to help people feel like included, like you get to do events and you get to teach culture
Yeah.
almost. So I actually started doing trainings in college about diversity and inclusion. And then a little did I know that in corporate America, it's this huge thing, right? And it's all structured differently. And whether it's with talent or whether it's its own, and it just kind of supports other lines of business. But familiar with it, you are a partner organization to ours. So students and learning how do we become experts in what we do, and then what along with like keeping your culture. And I think that's important, right? To be a professional, but then like being Latino. So I don't know if how do you bring your Latinidad? I know I've heard that word pretty often,
Mm-hmm.
but I think even with big organizations, but you still do business, and you have to know how different mindsets work,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you bring that value of why it's important to partner with Hispanic organizations and why it's important to just partner in general with diverse organizations. Along so I love that part. I love that part of just even learning about different cultures, of being able to support their efforts. So I'm constantly just being a champion to different initiatives that are happening while being Latina. And that's just a part of it. So I've never strayed those two things away. Like that's very much a part of my identity, that I've honed in. I don't know, like, how do you feel about how in engineering and being Latina, it's, I'm sure, another story. You guys did an amazing post the other day that I really loved. That was like the AOC post
Mm-hmm.
where you guys were on the stairs. I was like, I love that. I love that. And I think, wear the red shoes. I know at one point I was wearing like yellow stilettos around Dallas Fort Worth at some networking events because I was like, I am Latina and I'm going to wear some things that are a little bit bold. And that's okay because that's my personality.
Right.
Um, but don't underestimate the smart woman behind the shoes.
Yeah.
Don't let looks be deceiving, or definitely don't, what's the word? Judge people just by how they look.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the awesome things about just getting to know people in general, getting to know who they are and what their goals are.
Yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say, yeah, I think you made a really great point, and I know that's something that I've personally, and again, we've had multiple conversations. But for those listening, one about just your identity as a Hispanic and being a Latina or Latinx within, identifying in that, I want to say subgroup of Americans of, hell, a human population. And so it's really interesting, especially again, particularly for those of us living in America now, because it is this. We're grateful to be here, and it's certainly the American dream, and that's so many of the immigrant families or the people who come over here is to have that opportunity, because we're promised anyone and everyone can make it. Just come work hard, be a good person, and like you have the opportunity to pursue happiness. And so it's beautiful. Funny enough, I made a whole podcast episode about the 4th of July, and when you really think about liberty and independence and freedom, like what does that truly mean? And it's funny because here in the, I'm going to say, kind of like straddling between like where you're from and your roots and your history, genealogy, versus like the assimilation. And so you saying wearing the red heels, wearing the yellow heels, again, like if that's who you are, then by all means. But I've found myself that, again, I'm fourth generation Texan. I'm much more a moderate, like, so yes, I'm a brave, bold person, but because my personality is so bold, I tend to like be muted in like what I wear. Like I
Mhm.
wear black and I wear neutral colors, and I feel like my style, my how I show up in the world is rather plain, but because the things I say, like my beliefs and how I present myself, is very strong. And again, I'm told I'm intimidating. It doesn't help the stereotype that Latinas are feisty, because then, especially being an engineer, like I'm very domineering. It comes off as arrogant or intimidating to other people, and it's not that that's quote unquote the Latin in me, or being the Latina. It's like that's how I was raised. I was raised to be
Mhm.
independent. I was raised in America that says, hey, if there's something wrong, you speak up. If there's an injustice, like you take responsibility for it, and like you're in control of yourself and your actions. And so it's really interesting because if or when I act out that way, that I've been trained, that I've been told this American dream, then people are like taken aback. Oh, like you're supposed to be a kind, soft, sweet woman. And then it's just this interesting dynamic. And it's really funny because, like I said, just understanding the identity and the definition around what a Latina is, or what I identify as Hispanic, or being a Hispanic in America, is certainly, someone else could have a different definition or connotation or what
Oh
it
yeah.
means.
And I think it's based on experience too, because everybody's experienced something differently,
Hmm.
right? And like you mentioned, your upbringing, like we're both Latinas, and it's okay to be different versions, like
Right.
our own version of it, right? Because you mentioned you're fourth generation, I'm first generation,
Hmm.
and I was born in Mexico and raised here in the U.S. And it's always like even like fun fact, I didn't visit Mexico for 20 years. So I didn't even feel like really connected to my roots. And that
Yeah.
was like sad for me because I'm like, I'm supposed to know my roots
Hmm.
and all that, but I didn't. And so, I mean, and it's like, I think how you claim it and how you own it is completely up to you.
Hmm.
And I think, just how you even claim being a woman. That's a whole nother topic of, you just claim whatever you want it to be,
Yep.
whatever you even classify yourself as, or there's just so much that we try to, I think, segment and put things into boxes that
Hmm.
sometimes things don't fit in boxes anymore, and
Yep.
we have to be okay with that. And you don't, yeah. So I'm all for just continuing to progress as accepting each other for who we are and who we want to be. um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and I know, again, it's funny because, again, years of these conversations, and it's exciting to kind of have these topics all kind of unfold. But similarly with, again, your work in the Hispanic, organizations. Again, I've went full head into SHIP, right, and any other organizations that are, again, just dedicated. You were saying like the AOC, challenge, just finding other women and other, Latinas in STEM has been just, I want to say, like life changing for me, because I did feel like I was doing it alone for the last 20 years.
Mhm.
um, but understanding that, yes, it's great that we find this community, but I love that you said it, like really being passionate and intentional about our collaboration, and
Mhm.
understanding, and you just said it perfectly, like not everyone fits in a box. So outside of even just allies, identifying again that we could, and intentionally being the only Hispanic in the room, and being comfortable with that, right? Seeking
Oh yeah.
to be in rooms that maybe we weren't invited to before, or other people didn't even know that we were interested in being. I think there's certainly, and I'll say, like some hurt feelings, right? Some hurt egos, and it could be generational.
Uh-huh.
I want to say, like, not to say that people have not intentionally left us out in the past. That's a thing too. But sometimes is I just simply say, like, hey, I want to be a speaker. Like, I expect to get paid now. People are like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, now I know to pay you. Whereas, if we don't ask for it, people don't know what
Yeah.
we want or what we're looking for. So I guess, like, what's your take, or how have you, or have made an intention of kind of being in rooms outside of just Hispanic leadership, and just general leadership and general business?
Yeah. There's a few things that came rushing to my head when you said that.
Hmm.
First thing is like a long time ago, I'd say definitely more than 10 years ago, because that's, can't believe it's been 10 years.
I know.
But I mean, that was like in my college years trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And I learned you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Totally messed that one up, but it's okay. So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that was what literally the definition of walking into a room and not knowing anybody. And I know a lot of people can just like shut down and it's like, I'm going to go to the food section. I'm going to stay over here. And so that was kind of like me beginning to really network and just go and meet people and just go and say hi. And I know it's talked about all the time, but you do have to become somewhat comfortable with who you are to
Mm-hmm.
then be comfortable in that space. So kind of accepting yourself as just who you are. Again, your identity. Yes, you're Latina. So basically, recognizing all the things you are before you walk into the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you recognize it, it doesn't hurt, or there's nothing that can be done to you.
Right.
People are going to look at you and say, oh, that's the only Latina in the room, and you're going to be like, yes, I know that, I'm here and I have arrived.
Yes.
So it's like a different kind of feeling. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
the party has arrived.
Yeah. I'm here. It's okay.
Yeah, so I think it's like when you accept that, right? When you accept your identity and you accept who you are, it's just walking into that room is so much more comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
I can say that from sitting in tables with like CEOs from Fortune 500 companies throughout these past 4 years. And, because of the work that I do, when I work closely with these partners, I am the only, and there's been a few times where I've had to have some conversations with people and I'm like the only millennial at the table and I'm like defending us as millennials
Mm-hmm.
because they're just like, man, these millennials and they want all this and they want all that, um, but they don't work for it. And I'm just like, oh, well, have you guys ever thought about this? And it's like you mentioned, um, you almost have to be grateful to be at that table so you can be a voice for that particular group or whoever it may be. You're being a voice to them, and it might be that that they don't have experience with talking to millennials or anything like that. It's like, well, here is a little bit of what we think, right?
Right.
And it's about sharing that thought, whether we're listening to you or you're listening to us, but you have to be able to have those conversations, agree to disagree, but either way, you're like learning and growing. So I think that has been very helpful to me to, one, understand who I am, be comfortable with who I am, even my age. But I think I've always, because of what I do, I try to, if you work with executives, know what's happening in their company. So you'd have something to relate with. So this kind of just goes as a general tip for anybody. With if you are trying to either work with somebody or persuade something, learn about what's a good, what it is both of interest to you. Like it could literally be in some of my conversations and networking have been like, look, it's raining outside. We both mutually understand what that means,
Right.
right? And that's how you can start a conversation. So I kind of strayed from the question as far as being like a leader, but I think a lot of that self-confidence is definitely a skill that you need. And it roots from that identity. And then being also confident in your skills and what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been, I don't want to say blessed and grateful because you also want to put in the hard work that you've done.
All right.
It hasn't been given to you. I've worked really hard to to be in the spaces that I've been in
Mm-hmm.
because, and I think I brought this on our off conversation. I talked about just being willing to learn and do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those two things are something that I've done within the last 5 years that I've always been the first one to say, hey, I'll take on that project. I'll learn how to, I don't know how to use this platform, but you know what? I'm going to learn how to use it and I'm going to give you the answers. And I'm going to, you essentially do what you're hired to do. You give solutions, you help solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two things that I constantly think people are hired to do. So success for your career is give solutions and, solve things along the way. So I always considered, I'm not a full engineer, but I'm like, I probably have some skill sets of engineers because that's essentially what you guys are constantly doing,
Yep.
right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's just a little bit of kind of my experience in being a leader, and also being essentially bold and bringing new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're not always going to work out or they're not always going to come out to fruit, but at least you're vocal enough to put them out there and you're vocal enough to say, hey, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should consider that. I think that's also been something that I learned it doesn't always happen at the table. A lot of people will just go with whatever is being said to them. And I think, to be an active leader and to actively want things to progress to be better, you have to also put in your 2 cents. And and often, like, I think it's like, if I say it, then I'm going to be tasked to do it. Well, you know what? If it's going to be a better idea, then go for it. If it's going to be a better idea and it's going to help the organization, then you're a really passionate person that needs to be at that table, because you're constantly
Right.
working to make that table and that group better.
Yeah.
Not to say that I, I guess it's level of respect with people that have the seat but don't do anything with the seat.
Hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah.
absolutely. And that's why I think again the initial question was again like doing all of this work, being a community leader, within our community and specifically again ethnicity and being Hispanic or representing the Latinx community. Again, a lot of times is stepping outside of that comfort zone. And so to your point, saying being comfortable with being uncomfortable, recognizing what you're bringing to the room, simply to step outside of what you know, right? And you saying being willing to ask questions, just
Mhm.
go learn and do. It's funny because on all of these podcasts, and that the whole reason I even started the People Engineers, because a lot of times we look at our parents or the elders or people that are a couple of steps ahead of us and they're like, oh, they have it all figured out. And in reality, like there is no blueprint to being a human. Like there is,
Mhm.
no uh, instruction manual on how to do this whole life thing. And it's different for everyone because, again, what you consider success and happiness, or even a fulfilling relationship or marriage, like if you so choose, right, could be totally different for me or the next person. And so when people are saying, like, hey, how did you find happiness? It really comes down to having to try and trial and error for yourself in your own ways. And so it's really interesting, like I said, kind of how it becomes to expand. That original question was simply just stepping outside your comfort zone or being in rooms, that we're
Yeah.
traditionally not in. And now all of a sudden, again, it kind of opens up this whole world. So again, I know we kind of touched on, you got funny enough touched on every topic that we were going to talk about today, which is perfect because it shows how much synergy is there. But you had mentioned kind of acknowledging things that you are helping you identify and how you were first generation. Do you feel like there's a certain type of stereotype, expectation, maybe even a chip on your shoulder, just knowing what first gen means to you or even our society?
Yeah, I think that first gen, I mean, there's so much courage, right? There's so much, I want to say harder. And I know I hear a lot of like successful people, especially minority people, they're like, I've had to work twice as hard
Mm-hmm.
to get to where some of my counterparts, because of the color of their skin or whatever it may be, to get there. And I think being first generation, like you said, it's even less of a blueprint. Some people that, the parents have gone to college, or they might have even some money that their parents have saved for them for college. It kind of eases the process. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
first gen going to college, like, you are literally learning, and it can be challenging. So I think that's where it's exciting to see a lot of organizations come from that. Like, how do we help support each other? And I think just being first generation, you have to keep on learning, right? You have to keep on you have to keep on going, essentially, because then your kids will have it easier. Hopefully that's the goal, and I think that's the motivation there. So as far as like me, I feel even my brother who's 15, like, I'm hoping to help lay a decent blueprint for him to know about college a little bit more. So I think, being first generation, you should continue to also give back, because there's a few kids like 2-3 years behind you that are trying to figure it out. So that goes into like mentoring. Even if you are first generation, even if you feel like you are still learning, like for you and me, like we're still learning, we should always kind of try to pull the next ones coming up, even if they're not that, I think most of the time, and I want to talk about mentoring, most of the time we think that we have to be like very successful. We have to have everything ready, and then now we can give back. I think a big part of me as a first generation is like, I'm learning, but I also like, what can I help others with? Because I know that, maybe I found this really cool tool, like, who can I share it with? Who told me that they needed it? And stuff like that. So that's, I think, a part of helping and learning,
Just acknowledging, that we have no idea, but as we're learning and going, again, I'm fourth generation Texan, right?
Mhm.
again, I call myself a mestizo because I'm kind of a little bit of everything, but simply just being a first generation like college graduate. So, my mom went to college. My mom had to end up leaving after getting her associates in accounting because she had to go home and take care of her mom, who was sick with cancer. So again, in my mom's head, she was like, you have to go to college. Like that's what, will
Mhm.
help you get the good job. It doesn't matter what you go for. Although when I picked engineering, she was like, you're going to pick one thing. And like, I don't care how long it takes you, but like, you're going to get your degree in that one thing. And I literally like remember
Wow.
signing on the kitchen table, like 4 years. If I take any longer than that, then I had to take care of myself, which it did take me, I want to say what, 5.5 years. And so it was something like that. Like, I'm willing to help. I know this is needed. But she also wanted to make sure that, again, I'm very grateful, as you mentioned, to be raised very independently. And on that note, too, of understanding there is a dichotomy of being grateful and understanding our own privileges. Like, thank God we had
Mhm.
parents that
Yeah.
supported us, right? Thank God we had a support system and people who are rooting for us. Because even that, some kids, are told and laughed at because they have big dreams. And so what's funny, shout out to Lorena, Girl Change the World on Instagram. But she actually made a
Oh.
post earlier today talking about, like, can we normalize acknowledging privileges before people give advice? Because one, even again,
Mhm.
first generations or some of us trailblazers who are doing it for the first time, either in our families, communities, or again, Latinas in STEM, right? 2% of the workforce out there. Even just being able to something again you and I talk about, right? Like being business owners or entrepreneurs. A lot of times it's like, yeah, I took all this hard work and I'm a self-made, millionaire, whatever, whatever. And then we ask like, oh, how did you get started? And they say, well, I sat down and I asked my grandma for a $10,000 loan. Well, that's not the same, right? Like not all of us have grandmas that are stacked like that. So it's something that's simple again, and good for you. Again, thank God you had that support. Thank God your grandma had that
Mhm.
money to invest in you. But a lot of us don't have that. And so, one, I think rather than us be envious or feel like, oh, well, that's not, you're not really self made then. They are in their own
Mhm.
right. But again, similarly, like, and again, I love this post that Lorena talked about because she was saying, like, they're at step, 7. And here I am at step 3, thinking, like, oh, I can start at step 7 with them, but not understanding you
Mhm.
didn't have those privileges to put you those 4 steps ahead like they were. So
Yeah.
simply just identifying, again, as we mentioned, and you said, kind of just understanding like where you start before you go into the room, understanding like where you are starting, the good things, the privileges you have had, the blessings, the
Mhm.
wonderful things working in your favor, and then what are the things that may be an uphill battle that may be something that other people aren't going to understand, or it's only going to be a personal endeavor for you. So
Mhm.
again, I think you said it really beautifully in first gen, having to kind of work twice as hard, understanding that a lot of times it takes the courage to step out and be that trailblazer.
Mhm.
And even that sometimes, it's okay for you to be content, as you mentioned, and just make sure, hey, I'm going to make this one little step, because then as moving forward, the generations behind me can take it further, or my kids, or
Mhm.
help the
Yeah.
rest of my community. And I think um, in general, kind of the American dream or having it all has become very sexy and romanticized. When in reality, if your dream is just to have a house and for the first time in your entire family's genealogy, not live paycheck to paycheck, like that's success to shoot for too.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, financial wealth and just generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of comes into a little bit of business. Like we have to learn how to be a business savvy.
Mm-hmm.
It only is going to benefit you as a person more if if you one, read into things. I think, sometimes what's heartbreaking is we get stuck in these dilemmas, business schemes or whatever it may be. So I think part of being first generational is like doing a lot of research. I
Mm-hmm.
realized that we're probably all first generation or like the masters at research. And we should be, right? Before you sign something, before you do anything, like do research because it's going to benefit you the most. And not just taking your first option. And that responsibility does lie on you. And just know that, if the more research you do, it's going to lead you to a better decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a little bit of what I wanted to talk about is just that business knowledge from accounting and financing to just general like project management. I am really big on, I mean, I did my marketing business degree, and then just because I love that space. But then I did my master's in business, and I think that it's like really important just for people just to take a general business course
Mm-hmm.
and to learn that even if you become a doctor, you're going to open your own practice and you're going to need to know how to promote your business.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, like you mentioned, entrepreneurship, that has all of the elements, and you guys like manage your own marketing, your own like everything. So I think, more as you learn how to operate yourself like a business.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what I've brought back to myself is I have to learn how to manage my finances. I have to learn how to just execute the goals that I set, right? Those SMART goals. I think Fernando had posted two of my favorite things. He posted SMART goals, which is something I almost live by. Well, no, I have to say the SWOT analysis
Mm-hmm.
is something I almost live by and literally use that analysis for almost every situation. Okay,
Yep.
what are the strengths of the situation? What are the weaknesses? How can I make this an opportunity? And like, what should I be aware of as far as
Mm-hmm.
threats? So even taking those like basic principles and learning how to use even some principles of engineering. I know you are an expert in that field of how to maximize your operation, how to, and I think from the business perspective, I'm constantly always looking at organizational change. How can you make things better? There's always room for improvement. I think we're so similar in that mindset that we're constantly improving ourselves. I think I saw on your Instagram, you're like 10 years of progress. And I'm like, I love that. You have to, one, acknowledge the like small accomplishments you do individually, but also again take that mindset in the spaces that you go into. And that's one of the things that I've constantly said. If I'm not helping whatever business or, even friends, if I'm not helping you, then I'm not being a good, you know, use of your space or your time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of probably went off on the business mindset
No,
a
and
lot
that's
there, but I
great.
think that we have to, right? If we want to progress as a one Latino generation that's going to be financially savvy, that's going to manage their expenses, to manage then your financial growth, like you have to know some fundamentals of business.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I'm not telling everybody to go get a business degree, but I think, I think it's those are the things that we don't learn too much in school, how to manage your credit.
But no, and I think you covered it well. Again, of again understanding the research side that goes into it. I 150% agree in that everyone should have some type of just basic business acumen. That's the biggest thing I try to teach everyone. Exactly as you mentioned, my experience, my expertise. I nerd out about operations, again, auditing. Like how do you have a solid, work instruction? Again, starting a SWOT analysis is the first step. Setting smart goals is again step two, kind of like what's the big vision you're trying to get to, and then start kind of breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, doing a little at a time, slowing down enough to really assess the situation. And to your point earlier, are we doing the best we can? Is there any way to improve this? Again, the engineering principles that I like again live for, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is life changing, is Lean Six Sigma, which is literally
Mm-hmm.
like cutting out the fat and just doing what's necessary. Like what is value added? That there's a whole literally certification.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my entire consulting firm is just based on that. What
Yeah.
rather than taking two steps to the right and trying to grab a tool and walking two steps back to the left, like how do I just move the tool where I need it to be all the time? And it's something that's simple, but again, if we don't slow down to be intentional or to ask the questions or again to assess ourselves, it could easily go over our heads, or we just always say that's just how we do things. So it's similarly, again, any type of ship chapter, individual business entrepreneur, exactly to your point, like, do you have a basic understanding of business acumen? And I love that you said, learning how to manage yourself like a business, because, especially all that we're learning in this research world and having everything accessible with tips and tricks is, having your own personal board of directors, like you said, your
Mm-hmm.
personal finances. Funny enough, I was just telling my mom yesterday, she just stopped by for like 10 minutes to say hi. She was driving by, and I told her like to have more than $1,000 in my account was like mind boggling. and I have saved over $5,000. And that's just
That's
like
awesome.
a whirlwind for me. I would have never thought, but to understand that I have one, a savings account, two, an emergency fund, three, like I'm actually investing in my future. It's crazy to think about. But again, like, my poor mom was living paycheck to paycheck. Like, she was just making sure her three kids had food in their mouth. And granted, she was trying to save. I'm, grateful that she had emergency funds and good insurance, for if or when rainy days happened. But
Hmm.
outside of that, it's, to your point, she kind of made the sacrifice so that we could do that.
Hmm.
And to continue to learn and ask questions. Again, real estate and different ways of investing, I would have never thought, right? It's this kind of crazy
Yeah.
world that I feel like we're stepping into, Atlantis. It's a whole nother thing we would have never expected. And to now, again, do this research, ask the questions, just show up and learn the best we can. I think we're very eager, we're very hungry for it. Again, it was a very smooth transition into talking about business and essentially, again, your experience in being a businesswoman, because just business in general is kind of how the world works, especially in
Hmm.
I want to say the global economy we have now. It's very much a
Yeah.
capitalistic approach to everything. Here are the resources. You have, put some elbow grease into it and make it what you can. So I
Yeah.
really love that you tied it into life, because I very much see, engineering principles doing the same.
I want to mention something that you brought up was um, just the ecosystem. I think that like I learned how to navigate that when I was starting my career. Why one we exist as an organization, what is our value, and how does it coexist with everything else? So like I think that mindset of understanding the different parts of corporate Fortune 500, I mean the tech, like just even the structure that government kind of plays underneath is so important. I think we, should take more time to really understand it because that helps you to navigate it. I think, when we close ourselves from not learning about government and how it impacts us, that is hindering our knowledge and hindering our progression. And you shouldn't be afraid of it. And I'm not, an expert in government and knowing what's happened, but I know the general basics to know, okay, what can impact me, what's good, what's not good, and things like that. And I think, hopefully, like, the younger generation is also learning how to navigate these things. And the more that you can be comfortable in that space, and one, it's always okay to not know something. Um, and I think I've always been the person that's like, I have a question. That's you learning, and that's okay. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I think I worry if I am the smartest person in the room. That means I'm not learning.
Yeah,
so,
there, exactly.
um, so I think we just have to get away from that fear because I think we often are just like, let's just not say anything. It's
Right.
like, but you're hindering yourself from progressing and you're hindering yourself from learning about these things. That could add value if you were to understand them.
Absolutely. And
So that's
exactly to
definitely
your
like,
point, I think the curiosity is what has always made me a good engineer. To your point,
mm-hmm,
I've always been, hey, like, I have no idea what that means. Or when you say that acronym, like, what does that stand for? So
mm-hmm,
I love that. Again, especially the point that you said, if I'm not the smartest person in the room, I'm kind of nervous, right? Like, you want to continue to grow and invest in yourself. So I think that's definitely a beautiful philosophy, or even just a self check.
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the last things that I really wanted to make sure we didn't miss was the self worth of it. Within my last 5 years of progressing and being maybe the youngest person in the room, being the youngest, like, I do nonprofit fundraising, so it can be challenging. It's negotiation, it's sales, it's all that fun stuff. And even in like my different organizations, I think honing into my self worth and knowing how much value I'm bringing to how much you're giving me. I think you brought this up earlier, but
Hmm.
it takes me to the pay, and again building that generational wealth. And I can't build if I'm not getting compensated for the
Hmm.
work and my self worth. So I definitely like, even when it has been very challenging, just because I don't like to feel like a failure, but it's not being a failure. It's recognizing yourself within saying this isn't a good fit because
Right.
what I bring to you, you're not bringing to me. And you can't, like, I think that's where you should strive to find a an environment that nourishes you as well, like, that compensates you for the work that you're doing, but it's also kind of helping and building you.
Yeah, I
um
love that. And especially, again, you're talking about in a corporate sense, in a company, in a job, in a
mhm,
role, or even sales, right? A partnership, whether or not they're going to
mhm.
be your customer. And what's interesting is the more that I hear, again, business leaders like yourself, people that, again, are doing sales, um, it really ties into like literally everything in life is a relationship, right? So the
Oh
same
yeah,
way that if
100%.
you were dating someone and you're like, I will not tolerate this, or like, we are obviously not a good fit, I want what's best for you, but like obviously I'm not it, right? So, and I think that to your point, if it's negotiating your own salary, that's kind of my number one tip. And I know we were talking about mentoring earlier, but to
Mhm.
mentees, to people that are asking for advice, is like, as much as you're trying to be a good fit for them, like they need to be a good fit for you. You are literally going
Oh,
on first
100%.
dates. You are literally going on first dates to see whether or not it works. And it's okay if it doesn't. Some people, again, are going to be really attracted to the introverts and the quiet, artsy type. Other people are going to want to be super extroverted and go on adventures every weekend. And there's,
Mhm.
yeah, different companies, big, small, private, government, international. I mean, you name it, for everyone, similar to our own kind of preferences of, again, the type of people we're attracted to, the type of people that we're compatible with. And so it's really interesting because it's literally all about relationships. And someone like yourself,
Oh
who's,
yeah.
again, you live and breathe it from your sales aspect. It's just almost like a common knowledge, but definitely not a common practice.
Yeah, and I think I didn't learn it overnight. I actually learned it from building healthy relationships around me. And it came, I think you talk a lot about these things, about different topics that honestly, when I applaud you because we don't talk a lot enough about rejection, anxiety, or failure. So I keep up with you, Brianne. I'm like, what is she doing now? And I love because again, we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know about maybe last year I did an interview and I actually talked about, I don't talk about it a lot, just like my abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the fundamental, and this was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, I began to learn that self value.
Yeah.
And I began to, again, define those boundaries and be protective of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because, at the end of the day, if you don't protect yourself, like nobody else is, right? So you
Yeah.
have to set those standards, those boundaries. And this goes not just on a personal level of building healthy relationships around you. And I think, that learning that 10 years ago, and it's a constant thing that you're constantly working on. And it has been challenging, you see. It has been challenging because sometimes you do have to break up with friendships
Yeah.
because it's like this is not working out. And that's okay. I think that's a part of the growth too, when you can accept those things and you can wish people well, even if they're not, that relationship doesn't coexist anymore. Like that's okay, and that shows a lot of growth. But
Mhm.
then, taking those principles and applying them to your career and, applying them to your worth is really important.
Absolutely. And I think too is something people get really afraid of is setting those boundaries healthily, with family members, with friends. Simply just saying I'm okay with this and this is what I'm not okay with, or this is what I will accept and what I will not accept. So simply, again, making those connections, setting, being strong with what's healthy for you and maybe acknowledging what's toxic, and helping moving forward from there. So I appreciate the fact that you had mentioned, simply being able to set those healthy boundaries, because it is hard and it is a growth challenge for you to simply set, this are my boundaries, this is toxic, or this is what I will or will not top. Again, just being able to know your self-worth, and even that, acknowledging the benefits of failing, of struggling a little bit. I always feel like we don't know how strong we are until you have to
Mhm.
scrape your knees, or until you kind of fall on your face and then you have to get back up. It's not only one, humbling, but two, like, okay, I've been through worse. I've had worse days
Yeah.
on your bad days. So thank you for sharing that, and even having your own acknowledgement of that. I appreciate, again, the shout out for me sharing that. I just think So many times we're so ashamed and we get so caught up in our own self. And it's definitely the ego side, right? Of, oh my gosh, I can't let anyone know
Mhm.
like I suck this bad. And the reality is we're all doing it again, whether it's a relationship, romantically, or, having a really hard career fail. I failed
Yeah.
several times at work. And that's how we learn. That's how we grow. So with that, I think you had mentioned again about millennials and us being too young. And again, the willingness to do research, I think, is something
Mhm.
that's really interesting. Again, I think from the millennial standpoint, we grew up in this kind of middle of being raised kind of the good old day
Yeah.
ways, being outside playing, but also in the quick environment of having to adapt and learn quickly
And
with
learn.
trial and error. So understanding that, failure is a part of it, having pilots, quick iterations, certainly becomes a benefit. And in the point you made earlier of like this organizational change and continuous
Mhm.
improvement and asking questions, because we already know the new technology or phase two is already on its way and we want to be prepared.
Yeah, I think, something we didn't talk about is as millennials, I think we really need to realize what an advantage we have because we're comfortable with technology. We're comfortable with like the change because we've
Hmm.
been growing up with the change happening since we were 8, you
Yep.
know? So I think we have to like really take advantage of it. We are at that where things are going to continue to change, but we're not, as uncomfortable as some of our other generations that is completely new to them. They did not grow up with maybe some drones flying around or things like that.
Hmm.
So I think definitely like take advantage of all the opportunities, the resources that I think, our generation has as well. And yes, it's still challenging. I think we still are challenged with systematic things, that continue to not allow us to get to where we are, but I don't think we should give up. Uh, Again, there's so much that we can help each other. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is find that support within each other to make sure that we can push each other's dreams forward. That's
Absolutely.
definitely been a personal mission of mine that, it's if I don't get to mine next year, that's fine. I might be a little bit slower anyway. I'm still trying to figure it out. But if I can help, a partner or a friend of mine to continue to strive for their goal or their dream, like that is enough for me. But I did want to mention something else about with the self-worth thing, because I
Hmm.
know that there's a lot of professionals out there, young professionals that are, learning what they're good at. And, one of my colleagues that I worked with briefly on a project, I was like, you're a social media expert. Like, can you claim it and own it? Because trust me, the our leadership or you know um, this our management team, like they really don't understand it.
Hmm.
So I need you to claim that space. We need to claim the areas that we know, because that's going to help you a lot in your growth and in your career, to become experts in different areas and spaces. And don't be afraid of claiming it, and
Right. Yeah. And I
need to
think to
keep
your point,
giving.
yeah, and you say it greatly of, having that self-worth and knowing what value you bring. And again, you did talk about it earlier, tying into
Mhm.
that aspect of, again, like negotiating and the skill sets, but additionally acknowledging, to your point, the more that you're standing up for yourself, the more that you are showing other people what is capable and what is possible, because like you have no idea how many people are watching you or your own experiences. I'm funny enough in a group of Latinas in STEM, and a couple of them were talking about that not knowing how to negotiate, or again, like losing their
Mhm.
job in COVID. And they're like, well, do I still negotiate? And those of us who are older, and,
Mhm.
I'm 30 years old. So there's a couple of us around the 29, 30-year frame. And we were like,
Mhm.
absolutely. Again, and I kind of felt like I was dropping, tips and tricks. Like it's not always about salary, like negotiating for really what you want. What are you usually trying to get the dollar signs to make up for, or what kind of feeling are
Mhm.
you looking for? Because a lot of times, that you can negotiate in different ways, but again, if you weren't trained that way, if you didn't learn it that way. So again, there was several of us that were, I say a handful, two or three of us, that were dropping hints, or for the girls it was like bombs, like, oh my god, I would have never thought of that. To really just, hey, stepping up for yourself, claiming again your expertise, what you bring to the table, knowing your self-worth, you can then have leverage. And so that's a part of leadership that I feel like a lot of people don't say, and or acknowledge within themselves. And so you saying, acknowledging, hey, I'm simply showing up the way I can, and as I learn, I want to give back. It doesn't always have to be, again, money donations or your time.
Mm-hmm.
It can simply you just going and doing your thing, living your life the best you can, and showing people what's capable. And I think a lot of times, we always feel guilty, or we feel like we owe it to someone else. And yes, there's always a time and place, again, for outreach, for mentoring, for coaching or lifting others as we climb. But there's a piece of go out and do your damn thing, and like you're showing us, like we can follow behind the doors that you're opening.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's probably one of the things um, that I constantly say. Like, I don't go and like preach certain things. I go and I do, because I think action speaks a lot louder than sometimes saying it and just like constantly like putting it in like, you know, beating it into people's heads almost essentially. It's like, no, let me show you. Let me also invite you, right? I think that's a part of it. Invite people to the journey to learn. I think we talked about this when we were talking about just inviting each other to networking events. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I have no, like the ship engineering space is not my comfort zone, but hey, I am more than happy to go and attend and to learn. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's also a part, like we have to help people along the journey. And sometimes that is literally inviting them to, or sending them something that you think might be a good resource to them. And that's just being a good steward. I think, and I feel like that our generation, and I mean, a lot of other generations, but I definitely see it within the millennials that we're constantly like, what can we create? What can we do? What's the solution? I'm sure that is the base and the foundation for your entrepreneurship and found in your two businesses.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is missing in the market. Um, so no, I applaud you for your hard work and everything that you've done. And I am glad to just share a little bit about myself with you and your audience. It's always great to talk to you. And anything that I can share that, somebody could just take even one little bit of it and it's helpful for them or it's motivating, then that just brightens my day up. So I'm
Absolutely.
happy to
Well, thank
share.
you. Like I said, this is a wonderful conversation. It always is. I very much appreciate you taking the time. And both, I guess, either on YouTube or on the podcast, how can people find you? How do they reach out to you if they'd like to ask for more information? How do we get a hold of Ms. Diana Martinez?
Ms. Diana Martinez. Well, I am definitely, if you're looking to grow your LinkedIn network, I'd love to help you with that. So I am on LinkedIn, Diana E. Martinez. You have to put the E. If not, you'll be looking for days. I'm also do have my Facebook page, Diana E. Motivates. So probably I think it was like 2 years ago where I did my core site leaders work and again did start working on, how do I help people and motivate them, even if it's resources or things like that. So you can find me on Facebook as well, either Diana E. Martinez or Diana E. Motivates. Yeah, and love to continue to be a part of your network of amazing Latinas and amazing people. So if you need to, invite me back, I'd love to come back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you again taking time for me as well as the listeners. Again, we have a lot of really great, I want to say, older students and younger professionals. So this is really exciting. And again, always a wonderful time having this conversation. I'm excited again to cover so many topics with you and kind of wrap it up in this nice, beautifully transitional conversation. We kind of jumped everywhere and still even covered a lot
We
more in
did.
detail. So again, anything and everything we talked about, from being a Latina, a Hispanic, first generation, being a businesswoman, a millennial, and kind of how that all ties into being a leader, simply showing up, knowing our self-worth. So it's always
Mhm.
great, like I said, talking to you, learning from you. And thank you so much for all your time and all the great wonderful things you're doing and contributing to the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brianne. And I look forward to seeing you continue to have so much success. So, sending you a big hug, virtual hug.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Virtual hugs to everyone else, sending you so much light and love. And again, we'll have Diana's contact information in the show notes. Please feel free to like, subscribe, send some comments for questions. We can certainly have Diana or myself answer them for you. And if there's any other topics or
Definitely.
questions, again, Diana's willing to be on as well as a guest continuously. And anything else that you guys are looking for or need help with, we're here for you. Hope y'all have a good one. And I'll check you later. Bueno, bye.